Hello and welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Turning our attention now back to jobs and unemployment now. Both are once again the top problem facing Americans. According to a new poll from Gallup, almost 1 out of every 4 Americans rank that issue as their gravest concern. The economy ranks number 2, with 20% saying that is the biggest problem. The government and politicians had topped the list since the shutdown back in October, according to Gallup. The jump was most pronounced among Republicans, from 11% naming jobs and unemployment in January up to 24% in February. With me now in the studio to talk about all this is Money News editor Jeff Yastine. Jeff, it's great to have you with us.
Too, John.
All right, so when we look at these types of polling data here, it's somewhat disconcerting because consumer confidence, the whole sentiment of the consumer is very important. What does this tell you?
It tells me that really as much as we'd like to think that things have changed, they really haven't. I mean, one thing you can always do is trust in sort of the wisdom of the American people. People have a sense that the economy is changing, because of technological reasons, Obamacare, all the various things that we can point to. And because of that, as much as the data may say, hey, don't worry, be happy, same time, we all know it's just tough out there to find a real job, one that pays a good living wage.
Now, we hear about the Consumer Confidence Index a lot. Who is watching that number, and why are they watching it so closely?
Well, certainly investors are watching it because it's a good indicator of the ability of consumers to spend. I mean, if they feel good, if they're not concerned so much about things like jobs, obviously very important, then they're more willing to go out there and buy cars and buy all the other things, washing machines, all the other things that drive the rest of the economy.
So it's a momentum issue. Really.
It's momentum, but remember, as much change as our economy has gone through in recent years, it's still an economy based on consumer demand. Exports are moving higher and all that, but at the same time, it's still very much based on consumer demand.
So the consumer is king. What specifically does the consumer price or consumer confidence index tell us right now? Because it seems to be moving in what would appear to me like the right direction.
I think it's telling us that people can sense that perhaps we're at some sort of a change, but you look back the last 6, 7, 8 years since the financial crisis. Every time it looked like we were about to sort of get into some sort of sustainable mode, something happens and we fall back down. And I think that's the thing that people are still most concerned about. Evidence both in concern about the unemployment with the Gallup poll as well as what you were describing there.
Yeah, sure. I know it can change really quickly, so we'll keep our eye on consumer confidence because it seems a little discordant with that poll we were talking about. Also, a story that has been getting a lot of attention are these Bitcoins. We like to talk about them here. It's a fascinating thing to see here. In Seattle, it's going to become the first city in the United States to have one of these Bitcoin ATM machines. They've already had them made available in Canada, and we're likely to see them also in London and Singapore this year. So if you're in those cities, stop by and get some Bitcoins. Jeff, are you surprised to see... it's one thing to have this type of currency circulating on the internet where we've seen things like PayPal crop up, alternative forms of payment, still using the U.S. dollar. But are you surprised to see ATM machines for an alternative currency?
In some ways I am, especially for something like Bitcoin that hasn't been out there all that long. On the other hand, in many ways, like you and I talked once some weeks ago about does Bitcoin, is it a fad or is it something that has more legs to it, so to speak? And when you see things like this, you have to start thinking maybe we're seeing something very interesting and a longer lasting trend. I mean, is somebody's grandmother going to be using Bitcoin anytime soon? Perhaps not. I've never used it myself. But on the other hand, if you'd asked me in 1995, what the heck is Amazon or Yahoo? Most people would be like, I don't really know. It's something other people have talked about. Now everybody uses it. So, maybe that will happen with Bitcoin. It's very hard to say.
Now, as opposed to a way to spend this money as a currency, is it being talked about as an investment strategy or a vehicle by anybody?
Some Bitcoin proponents have been talking about it, and that was one of the key reasons why the core group of people behind Bitcoin in many ways wanted to get it, because it's a way to sort of sidestep the Federal Reserve. We all see how the Fed is continuing to manipulate the dollar and keep it sort of pressed down to devalue it. Bitcoin theoretically is a way to move around that. Whether it actually plays out that way or not, of course, remains to be seen. And sovereign governments don't necessarily really cotton too well to Bitcoin either.
Be interesting to see a correlation, if there is one, between the popular opinion of the Federal Reserve and the value of the Bitcoins. Let's turn our attention now to something that's a little bit more established, if you will, and that's gold right now. We saw it top $1,300 an ounce on Friday. Yesterday it rose again. Today it looks like it's up a little bit as well, as I check right now. Jeff, there are still a lot of gold forecasters right now who are bearish on this precious metal. Why is that?
It's because, and I was just writing something about this, and so some of my gurus, I have a guru, Tom Luongo, who writes for one of our newsletters, Gold Stock Advisor. And the one thing you see with a lot of analysts, look, they all got it wrong last year. I mean, I think the London Bullion Market Association has a survey. Last year, the survey, forecast survey, was for an average price of gold for around $1,400 an ounce. So the analysts miss that one completely. So now, in many ways, it's just human nature. They're going in the other direction. I was just reading in, I think it was Bloomberg this morning, that despite gold's big move that you just talked about, several of the most prominent gold analysts are still very bearish and see a price at around like $1,000, $1,050 an ounce. So I attribute much of what you're describing here to just straight out human nature,
Okay.
They're sticking to their guns.
And so what do you look at in the year ahead that you think might have the most significant impact on the price of gold, good or bad?
The key thing is to look at what the economy's doing. And we talked before about how sometimes markets need to look and investors need to look over the horizon. All right, it's not what's in front of you; it's what might be over that you can't quite see yet. That's what markets do; they anticipate. So look at what the economy's doing. If it looks like some of the data is starting to come in weak, and it has been of late, so mixed but also weak, then you're going to start seeing the Fed start making noises that perhaps we're not going to withdraw so much stimulus. If it's really weak, they may even start to go back into quantitative easing mode. If they do that, that means good times ahead for gold.
And potentially, good times ahead for the stock market as well. We saw Janet Yellen come out and talk about kind of business as usual, keeping the quantitative easing in place for the most part. Right. The markets seem to like that. The Dow Jones Industrial up again, the S&P up again as well. Is this a sustained rally here? Is this, more of the same, or?
I wish I knew, of course. I wish I had my crystal ball in front of me. It's so hard to say because there are so many different aspects to our economy and to the stock market. But certainly, if all the markets are going to be doing is looking at what the Fed does and says and doesn't do, then as long as Janet Yellen is saying we are very much focused on quantitative easing and supporting the stock market, then the stock market's chances are it's going to stay high until it finds something else to worry about.
Well, certainly a lot of people are watching very closely with everything that Janet Yellen does, maybe too closely. So we'll be keep an eye on that as well, maybe not quite as close. We also want to hear from you guys about this discussion. We have some social media posts we'd like to get to here in just a second. If you could put those up on the screen, I think we have those ready for you. From our Facebook friends, here is Bruce B. Failure compounded by ineptitude. I assume he's talking about the administration right there. Next up, Judith K. It is a disaster, but clearly meeting the objective of destroying our nation's health care system. Obviously talking about Obamacare right there. Also, John W. saying it is a huge failure and should have never been passed and signed into law. It is communism. An opinion there coming from Facebook. John W. writing into us. We appreciate all your comments. Keep them coming. We'll be right back with more here on America's Forum on Newsmax TV.